Hey everybody, I'm Vincent, founder of Three Nails Information Security. Today we have on Arnaud Lucas, who is the CTO and VP of Engineering at Wanderoo. I'm really excited to have Arnaud on. He's got some great stories to tell. And Arnaud, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a bit about how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, it sounds good. So my name is Arnaud. I'm, you mentioned, CTO VP of Engineering at Wanderoo. Um, so as you can hear from my accent, I'm actually not from Boston, even so that's where I live currently. I'm originally from France, from the north of France, where we tend to have deeper accents, even on the French side of things. But I've been in the US for 26 years. So, and my career has been mostly by far in the US. First 8 years in Texas, actually doing startups, including one in cybersecurity. So that was very interesting exposure early on. And then I moved to Boston actually a while back, and first at Iron Mountain. Iron Mountain was a great experience for me as an architect because Iron Mountain does care a lot about security and making sure and quality and making sure that we have. In that case, I was working on a SaaS digital archiving product that can scale, can be reliable, but also can be secure. And we became a security ambassador in my team. As a result, thanks to the push from the company, we had the pleasure of working on cutting edge technologies. We got multiple patents for that. It's kind of fun. Great culture as well. And then I moved to TripAdvisor, very different kind of industry, very interesting as well. TripAdvisor grew very fast while I was there. I stayed there for a very long time because it was such a fantastic company doing very different things across e-commerce and B2C. But after a while, I said, okay, at that point, I became a leader. I became a senior director there. So after a while, I said, oh, can I do the same thing, but different companies? So I joined Wayfair. Wayfair, a very great company as well. Was there for a while. Did very different things as well, including scaling our mobile apps, opening the first physical retail store, launching a service platform where we have kind of contractors helping people in their homes and more. But after a while, I was like, you know what? What I would like to do is go back to be doing a startup, but more as an executive. And that's how I ended up at Wanderoo, which is an e-commerce online marketplace for ground transportation as a CTO and a VP of engineering. For me, it was a great opportunity to kind of go into a small organization and apply everything I've learned throughout my career to a small organization. Now, I learned a lot through my tenure at Wanderoo as well, including on the security side for sure. Because we're a small team, a lot of things we're exposed to a lot of different things, big scope, and security is definitely one of them. So been there for 2.5 years now. Great company, really enjoys it. Wanderoo is interesting as well because it's based in Boston, where I'm located, but Wanderoo since the pandemic is remote only, so there is no office. So this is my office, effectively. So that's been interesting for sure.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that was really great. Love the experience in the background. It sounds like a lot of leadership experience, which is why ultimately I wanted to have you on here to sort of share some of your expertise, your stories. Being you just kind of mentioned how everybody's remote, so obviously that sort of assumes that you have everything hosted in the cloud or any of your applications and things and whatnot. They all live in the cloud, and so not owning a hosted infrastructure. What sorts of challenges does that sort of present in securing your organization's data?
Yeah, you're right. So Wanderoo is all in AWS, so in the clouds. And so one of the big things, obviously, to make it easily accessible to our customers, to our partners, and to our employees, right? I think for me, some of the bigger challenges in securing the organization's data One is that cyber attacks are always evolving, and I think that be able to keep on top of that is definitely getting more and more difficult, right? I remember in the old days when, so for a while, I was the tech owner of FlipKey, which is a startup that was acquired by TripAdvisor. And at FlipKey, I remember that were the few attacks, mostly DDoS attacks, where somebody from a single IP will send us a bunch of traffic, and and our standard response at that point, let's block the IP and move on, kind of thing. Nowadays it's not just one IP. Like it's much more sophisticated. We're trying to find any kind of fingerprint, and it's kind of hard to make out. So trying to find more comprehensive solution. Like those attacks definitely are getting better and better. Are evolving very quickly. The other point that we have to bears, and you could argue, oh, Wanderoo is a small company, but Wanderoo actually has a lot of data, and Wayfair has a lot of data, TripAdvisor has a lot of data, right? A lot of companies have more data than they can deal with effectively, but that from a security aspect, that creates an issue, right? Because which data is really important? What's our actual data footprint? Where is all the data, right? Because sometimes it's not just in our data lake, right? It can be in different systems all over the place. So it's spread across services, the cloud, on everybody's devices. So it's very hard to even know what data and where the data is at the end of the day. The third aspect I would say in terms of change is that it's very I think there was a statistic that hasn't changed for the last decade, which is that most of the security issues come from a human error, like an actual employee making a mistake, right? Making a mistake allowing an attacker to come in, making a mistake opening something that shouldn't be open, and usually it's very accidental, or it is not on purpose. Sometimes it can be on purpose, like employees have a culture or something, but usually it's accidental where sensitive data make their way out. And so then becomes the question of how to train employees on that, how to make them aware of the risk, and so on. Number 4 is that not just the threats, but the compliance and regulations keeps on changing as well. And it's not just GDPR or CCPA or HIPAA in the medical industry, even so I don't have much knowledge of that. There are also other, like in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts cyber rules that exist, New York as well. So there is kind of this patchwork of needs for compliance across different states. In the US, and it's not necessarily very well harmonized for now. So understanding the landscape and how to comply to things from a security standpoint can be challenging. And usually, that requires some help for sure. The other aspect, and maybe we can talk more about that, is the fact that, and that I can't mention that in terms of human error, but at the end of the day, I'm an engineer at heart. And what I understood very quickly, especially when I was working at Iron Mountain, is that security is everyone's responsibility. Right? It's not just kind of on the side, like security teams or compliance team of any kind, right? Everybody has to care about security. Iron Mountain understood that, and that's why they wanted to have this ambassador that can really be embedded in the teams. Which was a precursor, I will argue, to kind of a DevSecOps in some ways, where there is somebody that knows about security that's embedded in the team that can promote security practices within the development cycle. But that's something I push as well at TripAdvisor, doing really getting developers inspired about security and the different, in that case, OWASP threats and other things, so that they are more aware. So as they are coding, it doesn't take more time actually to create a secure software. It's just a state of mind, right? You have to think about potential security issues that you're introducing. Number 6, in my opinion, is that we're more and more dependent on third-party software and solutions, right? Especially nowadays, right? There are lots of SaaS products that we are using every day, for example. But you're kind of relying on those platforms or those services to be secure as well. And how much how secure they are, right? So that can be a challenge as well. And obviously, as we grow the organization, like the scale of what it means to secure the organization changes too. So there is a lot of different changes. More data, more systems, external systems, growing organizations. It's a lot.
It seems like everybody has to sort of face that elephant in the room that is data security. Every single organization has to deal with that. Organizations that don't have hosted infrastructure seem to, they have probably a little bit less to be concerned about, because a lot of the security can be sort of thrust upon the SaaS provider, Office 365 or Google or whatever. And so how do you sort of balance, or are there any challenges in balancing like access and operational efficiency with security, securing of those clouds?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, because ultimately it's a balance, right? No matter what you do, it's a balance. Because on the one side, you want to make it easy for every party involved, your partners, your customers, your employees, to do what they need to do, right? So when you talk like e-commerce, one of the big things is to be frictionless, right? To make sure that people can go through the funnel and ultimately can buy what they want to buy, if they get what they need to buy, as less as possible. And so a lot from a product aspect, that's kind of the primary push in a lot of, especially e-commerce organization, is what can we do to streamline how customers find the right solution for them and how they can actually buy them. Now, the problem with that is, there is obviously a lot of security implications. There is fraud implications, but there are also security implications where making sure that your user or somebody else cannot hack into their accounts and can steal their data and other implications like that. So it's a lot of it's a balance in providing that frictionless, and sometimes making sure we know who the user is. Are they really the people that they say they are? And so that we can feel comfortable that you are not introducing a security issue at the same time, right? So at the end of the day, I think security, for me, there are multiple things about security I care about. One is security is like onions, right? It's not about blocking anything. It's about ultimately make it harder for people to do the wrong thing, and to the point that it becomes prohibitively expensive for them to do that. Now, same thing, technology is evolving fast on both sides, and especially on the side of the bad actors, where it becomes very cheap for them to do that. But ultimately, that's what it's having these kind of layers that people have to jump through hooks. The other aspect is really to understand, having more of a risk-based security approach, meaning that you're understanding where the risks are, what are you trying to protect, why, and then putting the protection together. Like, not everything is worth protecting at the same level, especially in terms of data. So be able to understand what is the critical data, how do you protect that in different ways. And then obviously, what I care about and what I always say is that people say, "Oh, engineers tend to be lazy people." That's not true, right? Engineers like clean and simple solutions, and what that means is that they are going to do what's the easiest for them to get their job done. Right? That's very rational, actually, for an engineer thing to do. And so, what I want is to make sure that security is built in, if you want it, everything that we do, so that it's not an afterthought process, and therefore while the engineer is delivering new features or bug fix or anything, like it's actually easier for them to do the right thing and make sure that there's things are secure every step of the way than the other way around. Right? So it's kind of that security by design, which I really care about. And then obviously there are ways that you can make security frictionless, right? Reduce friction, right? Through MFA or single sign-on, there are passwordless solution that exists, and other solution that can give that level of security that we're looking for, and yet still make it easy for the user.
That was a really interesting term. I've actually not really heard that spoken about as that frictionless security. I think that's genius. I think that's very. It seems like it's intuitive, but it's actually probably not as easy as it takes a lot of lift on the backside to make it feel that way for the end users. And so I think I really appreciate that. I think I want to let that resonate with me after this episode actually, and think about that. And yeah, that's really neat. It totally threw off my other thought process, because it was like, wow, that's actually really, it's just wise, because the less effort that you can make doing the right thing, possible, like the better, the more successful, like the probability of success and security is so much higher.
And that friction aspect should apply to everything, right? To our employees, to our users, to our partners, right? It's how to make it simple for them and yet secure, right? And that's, you're right. That's, I think, technology and practices, and also like to some extent compliance is evolving towards that, because I think there are something that NIST mentioned that no, you should not have complex password, because otherwise you're going to write them down on a piece of paper and it's less secure anyway. So come up with the password actually easy to remember instead. No, don't change your password anymore every week. That doesn't make it more secure. So I think there is a recognition of that hardware doesn't make it better.
Well said. Yeah. What are some of the strategies you feel like are really effective in sort of staying ahead of emerging threats? You have a unique perspective, having managed a lot of cloud, but I'm interested to hear your opinion there.
I think ultimately, security, at least for the company I've been at, are not necessarily core to what they do. Right? That's not, they care about securing user data, business data, and they don't want any breaches for sure. So the companies that I've worked at have been good at doing what they need to do. But at the same time, so because it's not part of their core business, they're keeping up to date ahead of emerging cyber threat can be hard, right? Because to be honest, we have other things to do that are more core to the business. So I think what's interesting there is, can we leverage other things that will give us that, right? And so obviously, maybe threat intelligence platform, actual, security products that are able to deal with certain categories of threats for us, so that we don't have to deal with it directly. It's and what is nice with SaaS products when you use this kind of solution is that the first product keeps on evolving as new threats are evolving, and the hope is that they can keep up with the threat, and so that we don't have to, by just using those products, hopefully we can get to a better place. Or there's opportunity also to share information, right? Be able to be aware of what's happening across the industry, like what happened with CrowdStrike. I mean, it feels like every week now there is some kind of big breach at big companies that
Very true.
that nobody and these are big companies that I know care about security, and yet somehow they are getting not just targeted, but they are having issues. And I think that's critical at least to learn from that, from those use cases, and say, well, is there anything that we missed on our side that we could learn from these kind of use cases? So that's something I always look at. And then, be able to have some kind of automation. One thing I always say is that visibility is always step one. And what I mean by that is that it's difficult, if not impossible, to fix a problem that you don't know exists, right? Or you cannot see. So having the right monitoring in place, effectively, in different aspects, and it's not just a security thing, right? Having the right monitoring in place across different parts of your stack or different part of your ecosystem, so that if there is an issue, it's visible to you, but you get as well alerted. I think it's critical, right? And that's something that physically we had to deal with. Like, there is an example of that where we were attacked, it's kind of a DDoS, but targeted DDoS, where a bad actor was able to exploit, keep on calling your typehead, which, typehead, as you know, is just, in the search bar, you're trying to find location and you keep on typing things. And every, starting at 3 characters, it will start sending like your ping to the backend server to try to understand what the user is typing and try to understand potentially what location is related. The problem with that is that our typehead originally was linked to was making call to Google API, right? So that not only wanted to understand what location, but we could then understand what the place ID is for that location, kind of thing. The problem with that is, as a result, it caused us to make a lot of calls to the Google API, knowing that we pay for those calls, which is a problem, right? So that's and thankfully we're at some kind of daily limit, where at some point Google is like, yeah, you reach your quota, bye bye, and that trigger for us to generate like 500 errors that then trigger an alert on our side to get paid. But ultimately, the first thing I did once I dealt with the proximity issue, which is block the bad actor, was that, well, how do we make sure that, okay, we may not be able to prevent that from happening fully, but what can we do to at least know about the issue sooner and be able to block the issue way sooner, right? So meaning that you're revisiting the quota on the Google API side, for example, to have not just a daily limit, but maybe an hourly limit, a per limit, per IP limit, these kind of things. On our side, better identify this kind of actors and doing all these things so that next time it happens, we know way before and what things already in place that can mitigate some of that to the point that it's not as beneficial to the user. So for me, that visibility alerting is kind of critical, because there are so many use cases you cannot prevent, but if at least you have that overall net of understanding of how your system is behaving, then you're better at finding potential issues than otherwise. Which means also like pen testing and vulnerability scanning, other things like that. That's what I mean by getting that data, and so that
Yes, beautiful. I was just gonna ask if you were implying it all to doing proactive measures like pen testing and things like that as well.
That's something I started doing at TripAdvisor. But the problem with pen testing, to be perfectly honest, is that you don't do it all the time. Like, it's not a regular thing. So for me, it's not the primary way I want to be finding issues. So I want to be finding potential security issues through other ways. Those other ways should definitely be software driven, like you're automatically finding vulnerabilities as they happen. So that you're using different software or different system to check. The other aspect that I put in place, I've done it since TripAdvisor, is typically having a bug bounty program, right? Where people, instead of effectively exposing all our bad secrets, bad vulnerabilities, coming to us, telling us about them, and then obviously they get rewarded for letting us know. I found it somewhat fairly effective actually in identifying critical measure, because the problem with having this monitoring in place is great, but there's always opportunity for some gaps, right? And I think that's where the having effectively external people that has, hey, you have a problem here, you have a problem there, I think can be very useful. And for me, therefore, the penetration testing is more like this overall validation, if that we're doing the right thing. Otherwise,
What do you think a good interval to conduct pen testing is? I mean, I also when I hear cloud pen testing too, I'm thinking a lot like cloud assessment as well. Like we're looking at your RBAC and all the different things to look for configuration settings and things like that, misconfigurations and whatnot. How often do you feel like it's useful to conduct cloud
so
tests?
for us, partly because that's a compliance aspect, but partly because of because those are not cheap, to be perfectly honest, at least for a small company. So with the thinking for me is more like yearly, uh, and which is why I don't want to use it as the primary way to find issues. Like for me, it's more confirmation that we don't have any obvious or any gaps of any kind. Uh, but so that's kind of my thinking. It's more to do it on a yearly basis to kind of make sure you're on the right track there. I believe there are way more things, to the point I was making earlier about, making sure that security is part of what everybody is doing, which I think is, the most important part, right? To make that happen first and foremost.
Okay. Arnaud, I really appreciate all your insights. I think it was really great to hear a perspective of somebody who's been able to manage, large enterprise, small, SMB, and kind of hear the differences. Even though it's interesting to hear that the role you're in sounds like maybe a smaller company, maybe, but is still fully cloud hosted. And I think that's really neat. And yeah, I really appreciate you jumping on. If anybody has questions about sort of what you do or about this podcast, how should they reach out to you?
LinkedIn has been the best platform for me, so people should feel free to message me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining. I really hope everybody enjoys the podcast as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment on this podcast. And if not, feel free to direct message Arnaud or myself, and I'll make sure that we get you connected and whatnot. So Arnaud, once again, thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Vincent. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks much.